Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Grow Your Path to Wellness. If this is your first time listening, my colleague Amanda and we host a new wellness guest every week, and we release our new episodes around evening time on Sundays. Amanda is continuing to take time away on maternity leave to care for her new adorable little one. So it's going to continue being me hosting our guests for now. As we tell everybody, to make sure that you're liking, subscribing, following us on all of our platforms so that way you don't miss out on our latest episodes. Last week, if you missed that, I hosted Heidi Gruss. She shared a plethora of tips and perspectives on particularly how women can repurpose their emotional trash can and start kind of stepping into their power and living authentically. So this week it's Lisa. Lisa's coming back. She's joining us again for our second to last Trauma and Chakra Healing Series. So today we're going to be covering the Third Eye Chakra. As always, welcome back, Lisa. Thank you for all of your knowledge and everything. And I know it's crazy that I know we started talking before recording and I was like, second to last, next time on the 21st will be our last one.
Yeah, it's crazy. Definitely been an amazing experience to be here with you, and of course with Amanda. And it's just so interesting because even as I prepare and find talking points, it's always funny how things are. Maybe I'm more aware of them, and like seeing things a little bit more in my daily life, and even for the third eye, having done some workshops in the last couple of weeks for myself and for my personal practice, that I'm like, oh my goodness, like this is just amazing. So yeah, we started with the root, which is safety, security, grounding. We want to make sure that we're rooted into Mother Earth. And the sacral is about creativity and sexual expression. Our solar plexus is our personal power. So I'm sure last week's podcast would really kind of come into embodying our solar plexus. Heart chakra is everything love, giving love, receiving love, all of the good, warm, fuzzy things. And our throat chakra is about our ability to express our authentic self. And so we come into the third eye today, which really is, for me, the pinnacle of what higher sense of self and being is. We talked about the first three chakras are that physical and grounding sense, and the heart is the bridge between the physical and kind of the metaphysical parts of self, or the higher self. And when we talk about trauma, especially like early childhood trauma, where there might be a lot of gaslighting, or intuition is kind of not embraced. People might have some blockages with their third eye. So the color is indigo. So as we kind of go through all of the colors, we're looking at the colors of the rainbow. And it literally is like right here, right above our eyebrows, in the middle of our forehead, as it's named, third eye. It's really interesting because previously we've talked about like elements that are associated with each of the chakras, but because the third eye is beyond the physical world, there are no elements that are associated with it. And so it is about our sensory, our psychic, and our intuitive abilities. So yeah.
Yeah, because this one, whenever I had my own Reiki session done, I had more, some disclosure, I guess, I don't know, but like more of the ones that were blockages, and then I talked about more in depth with my, practitioner, were the lower ones. So I was super excited for today. And the third eye is one I don't know a whole lot about. So how does that present for people if it is blocked, so to speak?
Yeah, so kind of giving a little bit more context is that it is the command center. So this is where our mirror neurons are. If you look at, the neurobiology, especially like if you're reading something like Body Keeps the Score, and looking at how trauma is kept within the body. And it is the phrase I am. So when we think about our clients that might come in and might not have a good sense of self, what are some of the I ams that they say that are not empowering, right?
Right.
So it's
so many things. What was the statement for the throat? I not to go back in time, but what my brain doesn't remember. The statement. Okay. So then this one is I am, like more of the embodied self.
Yeah. So I am loved. I am valued. I am worthy, right? So we want to have those empowered statements of I am. Excuse me. So the symbol, which unfortunately we can't show, but I would highly encourage you to look at all of the symbols of the chakras. But the symbol here on each petal, there's a petal on either side. And so together they create the phrase I am. And those two petals also symbolize the sun and the moon, yin and yang, the masculine and feminine, and the two hemispheres of the brain, of our conscious and unconscious.
Like how? And when you say petals, like as in like on a plant, or like
Yes.
flower petals?
Yes. So many of the symbols have representations of lotus or lotus petals within their, I guess, picture, for lack of better words. And so, yeah, and each of the symbols do have meaning to each of the chakras. Excuse me. So really kind of looking at how we see ourselves in connection to other people, also to ourselves, and then the universe, right? And so we are separate, but we are also one.
Mm-hmm. I love this stuff. It's so powerful. And like, I know we say this every episode here, but how each one of the chakras build off of one another. And I can't help but like go back in my mind to previous episodes and how all of these build up to this third. I know we're doing Crown next time, but it's so interesting to me and very powerful.
Yeah. And so before, like I was talking about, like our traumas, and depending on what that specific trauma might be, our intuition might have been damaged because of that, or our ability to believe our intuition might have been damaged. And so when I said, it is our connection with ourself, connection with everyone else, and connection with the universe, think about times where people have experienced trauma where they are so disconnected from the universe, right? From a thought of a higher self or a higher sense of being, disconnected from everyone around them, and even disconnected from body, from embodied experiences.
Mm-hmm. And it takes me right. And I every episode I say, I only speak to my own, clinical experience and things. And it really takes me into a thought process about those clients of mine who have experienced like attachment trauma, like growing up with those primary caregivers, and whether that was the ACEs we refer to all the time, but those instances of abuse, neglect, violence, or witnessing those things, or those things happening to them, and really implanting it's not safe for them to trust themselves, their intuition, or be present a lot of the time and feel connected.
Yeah. And in that imbalance is when we aren't able to believe our inner voice, and our inner consciousness whether it's the seen with the visual eye or the unseen with that metaphysical experience.
Yes, absolutely. It makes total sense. And it's like, how do we, get these things back aligned, and so that way I can be, and it's not easy, and I'm sure it takes quite the process to get there, but so that way they can step into themselves and show up in relationships and perceive relationships as safe again.
What's really, always phenomenal to me is how how the 12 steps really do apply to even people who don't find themselves in addiction, because finding a belief in a power higher than ourselves is part of the 12 steps. That is 100% within alignment of embodying our intuition, embodying this greater wisdom of ourselves, and in this ascension through the chakras into the more intuitive and knowledge of existence.
For sure. So this here is the station for getting reconnected with myself and how I am perceiving myself and other people outside of me.
Yeah. Because if we look at energetically mirror neurons,
yes,
we are mirroring the people who are around us.
Absolutely.
So if we are with people who are dysfunctional and abusive versus people who are uplifting and empowering,
the way that is coming through us, and the way that we are then showing up and mirroring, or presenting in those ways or similar ways ourselves.
Yeah. And how difficult it can be for clients who are surrounded by the dysfunction to think that they can be anything else.
Right. And we do what we know until we know better. That saying came to my mind. And it's like, even, and it's like, sometimes for many, I've seen where it's like, it feels like I have to focus on surviving right now. Like, maybe I know better, but I don't have other resources or capabilities to get out of this living situation per se. So it's still, I can't be fully connected.
Right. You're right. And as you had said before, and as we've talked about in the other podcasts, is these chakras build on each other, and just like hierarchy of needs, they build on each other, and we can't find self-actualization if we don't have safety and if we don't have our basic needs met.
Yes. And I think that's where a lot of people, like, my brain instantly wants to, at this point, normalize reaching out for support, reaching out for resources, whether it is therapy or whether, it is just more concrete basic need resources. Because if you can get those things in place for yourself, people that are listening to this, like, really look at those things, and then it's okay to reach out and ask for help with those things, because you have to start where you are.
Yeah.
Because like, we're on the third eye and things, but when I look at these, if you break down the systematic barriers at place, it feels really big, and it's like, that I would love to be up there, but we always have to meet ourselves where we're at.
Yeah. And it's really interesting from the physical perspective as well, because the point of our third eye is essentially our pineal gland. And so our pineal gland is a very major part of hormone secretion. It's essential for releasing melatonin. So, and granted, I'm not a doctor, and I'm only, reporting back on, some things that, I've read about and know, but if we don't have good sleep cycles, how does that impact our mental health?
Yes. And my clients, I literally, even if I'm working with somebody and we've been feeling pretty solid, consistent, we've been doing the things, I still, almost every single session, and check in about how our basics of things have been, primarily sleep, but many other things as well.
Yeah. And, that our ability to have sensitivity to light, before we kind of got on, I had jokingly said, I'm not really sure if I'm happy about the weather today or sad about the weather today, but living in Ohio, seasonal affective disorder is a real thing, and not just for Ohio, but I know I experience that. And I know, Kelsi, you said you love the sun, get you out in the sun, and that is your element, right? And so what do we do for ourselves when environmentally the days are getting shorter?
Yes. It's like, I always have to think to myself, like, what are my backup things, not just to, cope, but to make sure I have other aspects of my needs and coping and all of that. It's kind of like a plan that I have for myself come wintertime. It's like, okay, if these things have been off track, like my sleep, how can I transition to sleep in a good, healthy way? How do I, listen to my body right now? What am I feeding it? My physical activity is huge because summertime, I am more active in more ways. And then like we were saying, like wintertime, I don't want to go outside like at all. So it's very important to have to know these things, and how can I regulate myself if one of these things are out of whack.
Yeah. And then, as much as the pineal gland is in the front of our brain, our pituitary gland is at the base of our skull, which is another really important function, right? So we have our circadian rhythm that comes through this. So again, all of these things really can throw someone off if your sleep cycles are off, if your sensitivity to light is off, if again you are having problems with other glands that could impact thyroid. So all of our endocrine system is really located up.
Yeah, it's like that regulatory center of keeping my body on its natural rhythm of functioning day to day. Like, I don't want to call it a schedule, but just regulated. And then we add in the context of trauma, and it's like, holy cow. I get wired for the opposite at that point. But yeah, that's like the center of regulation and like keeping things as, flowing as possible.
Yeah. And if we're stuck in fight, flight, or freeze, we're not tapping into these other resources.
Yes. No, those things are kind of on the back burner. My brain is like, here's all of these threats or things that I'm perceiving as threats at this point.
Yeah. And it's really interesting too, because Ayurvedic, which is part of like yogic philosophy and physiology and pathology, and the doshas, which there's three. There's the Vata, the Pitta, and the Kapha, and they all go into what the metabolic functions are and what we might be in alignment with and what we might need in terms of elements based on that. And that's a whole nother, discussion to kind of do a deep dive into that. But there are many philosophies that do come into alignment with the parts that can be dysfunctional in the third eye and how we experience the consequences of that.
Yeah. And then I had a thought, and it might take us down a rabbit hole, but it doesn't have to. But like our westernized, our medical system, and like if somebody would show up and in a physician's office, I'm not saying all physicians are the same. That's not what we're doing here. But very often, if I go in and I say, I'm sleeping awful, I don't really have an appetite, whatever those symptoms are of dysregulation and disconnection, I feel like if it is like, okay, here's a medication, and then it's like, maybe it helps some, but looking into these other, how can I, pursue, I'm not saying that that's negative, it's okay to go and get checked out by a physician, but also consider these things. That's why I love this series, because it'll put this information out there for people to be like, I'm going to continue seeing my physician, but what about these other ways of getting these elements, and to see how I can get things realigned this way, energetically and things.
I 100% appreciate that. And, it's interesting because I was having a conversation. I have had to get a new family physician, and I was really surprised that they had no idea what ACEs were. And yeah.
My facial reaction, people watching the YouTube probably saw that, but I was like, what? Oh my goodness.
And so I really think, part of this work is not only knowing what our trauma is, but advocating for ourselves to have appropriate care.
Yes.
Whether that be physical health, mental health counseling, spiritual counseling, all intellectual counseling, those four legs of what make us human are really, really, really important.
Yes, going into any kind of, healthcare is healthcare, mental healthcare, physical healthcare, like all of it. And spiritual, to me, is a type of healthcare. Spiritual health is the 8 dimensions of wellness. And it's, we're humans. We're not just a walking single organ, or it's in the brain. I feel like that we don't have to get into the whole stigma of mental health and mental health treatment in particular, but it's fascinating to me that the way that we'll treat other neurological conditions, like if it's concrete and if we can see it on a scan of some sort, like Alzheimer's or things, then it's like, okay, we see it, we know it's real. And I'm like, I don't know why we have to see something to know that what's malfunctioning is real for that person.
Yeah, even taking into consideration like sleep issues, we can't, there's really not good ways to test that. You might go and you might get a sleep study, but what if it's not like something as easily identifiable like sleep apnea, where you go and they can measure how many breaths you take, what if it's some other disorder? And, unfortunately, women who go through life changes, menopause being one of them, sleep is very much dysregulated, and you're kind of just told to suck it up, buttercup, and to go through years of sleep deprivation is so impactful to people's mental health.
And that feeling that with the third eye of feeling connected, grounded, and then I'm very vulnerable to so many other things, whether it is rest or all of these other regulatory, if these systems are not functioning in the way that they're meant to for my body, I'm way more vulnerable to so many other areas of dysfunction.
And then, looking at sleep is important because dreams are important.
Mm-hmm.
That is a really important part of our intellectual functioning and our perceptions of things that are seen and unseen around us. And then for people who have trauma, who might have hypervigilance because of nightmares.
Yes. And this, and I had never heard of it before, but I had somebody that I follow on TikTok. They were sharing their journey with when brought up sleep studies, and I'm not I couldn't even tell you the name of it, but it was some intervention that you wore like an Apple Watch at nighttime, and it would vibrate slightly if it started to pick up on sign like physical, neurofeedback that a nightmare was occurring, and it would, gather a lot of data, and it would also, it would do like a light vibration or something, and it would bring you out of the nightmare part, but not wake you. It was very intriguing to me, like not necessarily relevant for here, but I was like, these things, like we're trying to progress in these areas, and we're not there yet, but there's new and more things that I'm hearing about that's taking these types of things into consideration finally.
Yeah, that is really interesting. I would love to learn more about that. Yeah. And, being able to be open and receptive to the messages that we receive. And I don't know about you, but I know about myself, where there were times where my inner knowing said, probably not a good choice, or maybe, hey, that would be a really good risk to take, right? And we don't follow it. And so maybe we miss out on an opportunity because of fear or self worth or lack of self-esteem, or we make a decision that comes with some negative consequences and we knew better,
Right.
and we just didn't listen.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I don't want to say all the time, but even if it's, on a spectrum of those moments where it's like, oh, that's an opportunity, and it can trigger your own stuff, those core beliefs, limiting beliefs, the schemas, or you make a decision, and then you're asking yourself afterwards, like, what in the world? Why did I do that? I was not, my best, most aligned self whenever I made that choice.
And so for people who have trauma histories, we are disconnected. And it's part of not only, again, being embodied in self, it's being connected to other people and having a connection to the higher realm of what is around us. And we can feel as though our voice is foreign. We can feel as though we are spiritually cut off from the source, and whatever you call source. We can feel as though we don't have any intuition because all of our decisions are bad or come with negative consequences.
I've heard. So I'm sorry not to cut you off, but like that hit me so hard. I hear that so much in my work with my own clients and confidentiality, but like an overarching like theme that I see all the time is, I don't know if I do have intuition. I don't know what that is. I don't know what that feels like. I feel like I have none. Like, is it? And then that insecurity, and is this the statement I hear a lot that is said is this a trauma response, or is this my intuition?
And I think from what I've worked with, especially with people who are in recovery from, substance use, is that sitting alone with your own thoughts can feel dangerous.
Oh, yes. Yes, it can feel dangerous. It can feel like intolerable. We to things to just to make that stop, because I don't know how to sit with those.
Yeah. And so do we feel betrayed by ourselves? Do we feel betrayed by the higher knowing? You know, and again, for every individual, it can be different. And so do we sit in shame and guilt for the protection that we didn't give or didn't get for the situations?
Right. Or that guilt for how I like kind of tied in that feeling of I made a decision, or maybe I reacted, or my actions. Now I'm just sitting in guilt and shame and beating myself up for what I could have done differently, or what I just guilt and beating myself and punishing myself for how I did something.
Having a sense of feeling that no matter what, bad things happen. Maybe people are out to get you, having that hypervigilance, being stuck in fear, rejecting higher knowledge. All of those things can be part of a blockage.
When you say rejecting higher knowledge, can you elaborate on that a little bit? I wanted to make sure my brain's on the right wavelength with that one.
Just coming into like a deeper wisdom and knowing. And again, that can
closed off. Like might be a light way of putting it, but like open-mindedness, like not just learning, like knowledge, but just being more open or receptive.
Yeah. And you know, again, as you said, you know, making sure that we're not saying anything about clients, but you know, I know you've probably worked with people where you've given an intervention and they're like, yeah, no, that's not going to work. And then you give a different intervention and they're like, nope, not going to work. And then you give a different intervention and they're like, nope, not working. And then comes the question, you know, Amanda and I just talked about this recently. Well, then why come to counseling to get a different perspective?
Yes. And that's where, and I know I've said this in probably a million episodes, but I found success in that, saying, okay, can we just be curious about it? And I think like it would be hard for somebody with this being blocked, like a strong blockage, to have curiosity. Not completely open, like, yeah, I'll try anything, but just, okay, what can I be curious about? Pieces of it, aspects of it, like, instead of just, no, that definitely isn't going to work. And I always say I don't like that whole term of, you know, somebody being resistant. It's just that feeling of that blockage, or so many things could be going. I like to explore that with clients. Like, okay, what about this? You know, lately I'm not wanting to try these new perspective or new tools. What about that? Is, you know, what's underneath the no?
The fear. And that's part of the blockage is the fear and the anxiety and hypervigilance, right? If I'm not on high alert all the time, then I can't protect myself.
Yes. I've been holding on to that because it's become my, unfortunately, and when you say it out loud, it sounds contradictory, but that's become my familiar and what I've associated with feeling safe.
Right.
Stay there.
Yeah. And trauma creates experiences where nothing makes sense. You know, where we question, why did this happen to me? Or why does this person treat me this way? And there's a lot of questioning, and not for higher wisdom, but it's more kind of self-deprecating.
Yeah.
You know, like, what's wrong with me? Why am I not enough?
Yes. And it's very much so just making us disconnect and feel very stuck. It's like, that's a concept I do a lot of work on, and I'm sure all of us in the field, but that radical acceptance of, like, yes, we're not invalidating those things that happened, but I have to validate my experience with it, but then also, what aspects of this do I have to accept that maybe I won't understand, or I don't need to understand it in order to heal from it.
Yeah. And pain, right? That comes with trauma. It's physical, it's emotional, it's spiritual.
Yeah.
It can be even intellectual, like somebody who has, you know, gotten a TBI and maybe they're not able to function as they once did. That's a pain.
Yeah, we hosted Morgan, I think I'm saying her right, Benny, and she spoke on that concept and her experience with that. Well, it's 100% true, that kind of pain. Mm.
And so how do we cope with those distressing experiences?
Right. Are we coping in ways that are perpetuating my pain, or healing it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And how does that come in the body then, right? So we talk about having embodied experiences, headaches, migraines, you know, tension headaches. There's a reason why it's called a tension headache.
and I can see clients, like when I do my intake, you can see them kind of get caught off guard. Like, yeah, we ask about like pertinent medical history, but I also have a whole section on a checklist where I ask about like somatic experiences, and you know, I ask about anger and how that manifests and is expressed, but then I also ask about physical symptoms, and I say we're the expert in our own body, and what are things that you notice that maybe could be linked to these things, whether it is trauma or just mental health, or it all is one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, emotional dysregulation and sinus problems. So again, up in here, sinus. You know, I am a chronic sinus person, so maybe that's part of my fall time blues is that, you know, I get sinus infections. We talked about sleep, having difficulty with maybe seeing visions or having intrusive thoughts. I think you and I know Amanda and I have talked about, is it psychosis or is it somebody who's tapped into another dimension, right? And I don't remember if we talked about it on this podcast in a different episode or not. I know Amanda and I definitely have talked about it.
It may have came up on a past episode with all three of us before.
Yeah.
One, but yes, how are we relating to those types of experiences?
Mm-hmm. And looking at people who might have lack of empathy, feeling alone in their feelings and experiences. So again, you know, look at someone who might be a sexual assault survivor and nobody believes her. And how lonely that must feel.
Yes. Or I've worked with many victims, and it's maybe somebody told me they believed me, but then that betrayal of so many things that can happen after, you know, whether maintaining of relationships or, you know, just invalidation. So then it's like, hey, I don't feel heard. I don't feel respected. I don't feel protected. And then we always say, probably on many episodes, then we're more likely to isolate ourselves physically and emotionally.
Yeah. And even in that experience of assault is I don't feel connected to myself because maybe you know, looking back, I feel like I didn't trust my intuition or some reason that I'm blaming or shaming myself. I don't feel connected to the person or the people around me because, as we know, a lot of times assault happens with someone that we know.
Yeah.
And then that disconnect from higher being and source because this happened to me. and what makes me not enough or good.
Yes. Then, yeah, it's I love that example because it outlines how does this make me feel internally with myself, but then also those other people outside of me.
Yeah. Yeah. So blockages can include confusion, mental fog, right? Even if it's just a situational thing, and this isn't a chronic problem. But I laugh that last week, a week ago, I was cooking. I never leave the stove. I was cooking and my husband called me away and I started doing laundry. And the next thing I know, I burnt our bread. That those kinds of things where it's like, oh, well, there's my, ADD brain going, a million miles a minute, and I'm swirling all over the house when I should have been at the stove.
Yes, that not feeling completely connected to present moment. I'm like trying to be connected with multiple moments at the same time.
We cannot multitask. It's not possible.
No. To be effective, for sure, multitask is not it.
And so kind of going back to some of those clients that might have struggles with cynicism or pessimism because they feel as though, people or the world or things might be out to get them, that they can't catch a break, they have bad luck, having a lack of purpose, or feeling that connection. Again, that's a service. Purpose is service. And so if I don't feel connected to myself, to those around me, and to my higher being, my higher source, then what is my purpose?
Yes. And I know we've kind of touched on it sporadically here, but how would you approach that with somebody who, if they have that feeling of pessimism or, nothing good is ever going to happen for me, or there's, this system or this part of my life is out to get me, not like a, paranoia, but just I'm gonna stay away from that, whether that's the medical system or things like that.
Yeah,
I approach that.
I worked with a client that said if I had any luck, it was always bad luck. And so I think that in this space, it's very important not to diminish someone's experiences. So take grief, for example, where someone has died and we can say, oh, well, at least they're in a better place, or those things that we say to try to make the moment feel better, but we don't allow the person the space to have the experience.
Yes.
And so in someone who may be pessimistic or cynical, what are those experiences? Because they have reasons to feel that way, but what can we do to get that lens to shift?
Yes. And a lot of times when we're responding that way to others, at least they're in a better place, or, it could be worse, or some of the things that you hear, it's like, I'm also, a lot of times, I don't know how to sit with my own discomfort in that moment, let alone sitting with you and yours. So it's like, what can I always, not just validating that experience, but also holding space so they can experience it. Because of that hypervigilance and the way that they're functioning in day-to-day life without having a container or a space to hold that for them will keep, like we said, kind of keep existing and being their mood state, basically.
And this is a really interesting chakra too, to kind of tap into. Is it energetically that someone is a reason why we're just not meshing, or is this I'm projecting something onto someone and I need to look at myself?
Yes.
When someone is a little sandpapery or abrasive, and is it is it really that this person just is not in alignment, or what is it about myself? And to be able to ask those questions of ourselves are really important too.
Yes. And making sure that speaks volumes to how connected with myself, not just energetically, but with my own trauma, my own, that mirroring with other people, like such a trickle down effect. You know, none of us are living in a vacuum. Like, we're here, we're in this together. How can we, navigate this world? Because there's a lot of pain. Unfortunately, there's a lot of beauty and, all of the stuff on the other end of that spectrum as well, but the shared experience.
Yeah. And what's really interesting as well is, in the beauty of that, is looking for the messages and the connection. And one of the things that can come through are connections and messages through animals. So when you think about seeing butterflies and what the meanings of that is, dragonflies have a significant meaning for people. Certain birds like ravens or cardinals have certain meanings.
Yeah, it's so funny because it's not, well, it's kind of morbid, but also because I was always like, I'll sit on my back porch and there's always the same, it was a male and female cardinal. Like, every day I would see them and they would come and they would sit. I have like a string of lights hung up around my back porch, and they would come and they would both at the same time sit there and kind of look at me, and then they would fly off. And then one day I seen, and I something told me it was the same exact female cardinal that was like injured on like the side of our road. And then I never seen it again. It's sad, but like I instantly knew that it was the same one. Like that feeling of that connection. I was like, I swear, I know. And then I kept seeing the male one, but alone. But that connection was very real. And I told my husband, he was like, "How do you know it was the same?" I said, I just know. And now, because I only see the male now.
Wow, what an amazing experience.
I said, I was like, I don't know how to word that. Like, it's sad, but it is that feeling, like that connection. So, yeah.
So, yeah, looking at those messages, we don't want to brush them off or ignore them. We also have agency of self, and we can choose to believe things or not to believe things. And so, again, what is that exploration? And in the Yoga Sutras, it says that our own direct perception and experiences of an event is the most reliable of the 5 ways of right knowledge in the 5 pranayamas. So again, like, look.
Yeah, because like our perception is our reality.
Yeah.
And again, there's so many things that can go into how am I accurately, or how am I, what's my filter? We all can have filters for perceiving events, but as you work on getting this level of connection with self, others, and the universe, you start to be able to feel safe to trust that more.
Yeah. And it's really interesting too, because the Greek word fantasia means to make visible. So these subtle energies we are making visible through our mind, through our mind's eye, right? And that even if we imagine it, doesn't mean that it's not real. And there is intentional daydreaming. So like I did a master vibrational class last fall, and we learned about intentional daydreaming, like literally just making up, I don't want to say make up a story, but like you purposefully manifest things
Yeah.
in this intentional daydreaming. And this comes from your third eye.
Oh, I'm pretty sure I've done that, like myself, like just to reconnect with myself. I don't know. Is that my brain wants to put the label of guided imagery on it, but it's just more imagery that I am maybe not so much guided.
Maybe you're guided by your intuition.
Right. Yeah. Like not by an audio or a script, but intuition, and that being that connection with the third eye. Because I find myself doing that a lot.
Yeah. I have vision boards in my office here at home as well, which I constantly look at and are just part of that for me as well, in terms of purposeful and intentional daydreaming.
I love that. Huh. Yeah, so that's the like a connection and tuning into that third eye.
Yeah.
Learn something new.
So yeah, we learn something new every day, right? And so getting enough rest. So even if maybe our sleep cycles aren't great, rest is still important. One of the things that I learned recently, more so come into a personal practice, is 20 minutes of Shavasana can actually help increase sleep benefits. And so, one of the things, again, kind of going back to people feel like they can't be left alone with their own thoughts. And there's the misnomer of meditation means I have zero thoughts, and that is not the case. We want to honor what comes up, but to bring it back to presence, and that's where like breath and connection, using the senses is, as I'm lying there in Shavasana, can I feel the floor support me? Do I feel connected? If I'm in a yoga class, do I feel the energy of everyone around me in addition to the energy that I'm putting out? Again, so that connection is really important there. So looking at how we can expand intuition, and cultivate this opening for our third eye, comes in many different ways. You will be very happy to know that sunlight, exposure to sun, is definitely one of those.
Yeah, it's like, and it's so funny because what's my physical instinct whenever I stand, like I did it. I went to an event, last night, and it was cold, and I remember when the sun would peek out from behind the clouds, I found myself literally going like looking up and closing my eyes, and now I'm like, aha, oh,
Yeah.
it's great, and I feel like that's a good thing for our community, our listeners to hear, is just starting. It makes it feel less intimidating, like these topics. Just start cultivating a space for openness when it comes to your third eye. I know we're going to get into other ways to cultivate that as we wrap up, but kind of like that. And just foster it and see and be present with it.
And I think you said it very poetically and perfectly, is just to be curious. What, again, to bring in TikTok, I think there's a TikTok that goes around. The guy talks about going shopping with his wife to the metaphysical store.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I love them.
And at the very end of the day, if crystals do nothing other than offer beautiful decoration, I have some pretty cool decorations in my house and in my office. So kudos to me. At the very end of the day, if you don't believe that aromatherapy offers a higher vibration, you smell pretty good.
Right. It smells very pleasant. Like, okay.
There are not very many scents that I don't find pleasurable at all. So again, when we look at this expansion of being curious, what is the harm in adding, not only using, but adding these practices to physical health, mental health, intellectual health, and spiritual health growth.
Yes. And I use that concept with not just curiosity, but if there's something that I'm wondering about something, if there's, something that I want to look more into, or maybe even something like if I really feel like I'm deserving of a raise at work, like, I don't know, what would it hurt to ask or to look into it or to gather information or to experience it? And it's not going to put me in any worse, quote unquote, or, different boat than where I'm at right now, most likely.
Yeah.
But the opportunity for it to, be something of a positive or change experience is huge.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why I just love yoga and how it can introduce you to those experiences, and why yoga is so powerful for embodied experiences. Because even when you do yoga in a class, the energy that will carry you through that class of everybody collectively breathing, collectively maybe getting their ass kicked in a hot power class, is so profound.
Yes. That's something I keep telling myself is I need to get back into a regular yoga class again, because that feeling is so real. It's like so visceral, and then you get done at the end and you can feel, I feel just a shift in like myself physically, emotionally, spiritually. I just feel, I don't want to say heavier as in like a negative way, but like more relaxed. I don't feel as keyed up or tense afterwards. And I feel very connected and grounded whenever I leave.
Yeah, I was thinking grounded would probably be the perfect word. Yeah.
At least to the ground. I don't know. It's I love it.
Yeah. So some yoga poses for third eye is one of my favorites, is especially like when I'm at the beginning of my practice for like an hour or whatever, when we open up to child's pose. If you're not familiar with child's pose, you can either be, kind of butt to heels, knees closed and kind of bent over like a little pod, or you can have toes touching, knees wide open. But the part for this is the connection of forehead to the ground. And I don't know when you practice, Kelsi, but like that massage of left to right of my forehead into my mat sometimes is the connection and release that I need of like, okay, I'm here.
Yes. And when they say, feel free to, to rock back and forth or to do this or that, like I'm usually already doing it before they're like, saying like, hey, it's okay, to move around or to have that part of that experience, for sure.
Yes, 100%. If hopefully anybody who's listening to this goes to yoga classes where the teacher is open and always offers modifications, or to do intuitively what your body needs, that's really important. The other is when we are using stances where we can use our gaze, our third eye. So for me, one of my favorite teachers always kind of cues Warrior Two, where we are looking forward, but in our mind's eye, we're making sure that our back arm is in alignment with our shoulder and that we're creating this perfect space across our chest, and we're opening it, and that maybe our hips are squared and that our back leg is in position. So being able to use my third eye and connection to my body in space. I don't have to turn my head to look, to check, to see where is my arm, where is my leg. I can keep my gaze, my drishti, moving forward, and that connection to the pose. Another really great pose is wide-legged forward fold. So you're going to kind of be a little spread eagle. You're going to forward fold, head between the legs, and this allows all the blood to rush to the head. So this is really great to allow that to happen. Breathing deeply, feeling the pulse in different areas of the body is really empowering in this. There's some different ways that modifications that you can use this pose. You can do a bind behind the back, maybe clasping your hands. Maybe you just feel better putting your hands to your ankles to kind of help support that. Another thing you can do is you can put a block here and have that connection as well. So just making sure that when we come up, that if we're feeling a little lightheaded or dizzy from having the blood come to the head, that we are taking care of that. And then not necessarily a yoga pose, but alternate nostril breathing does open up the third eye as well. So
literally, right? Like you block one.
Yes.
I've heard of it. I don't think I've ever done it, but I've heard of it.
So it's really interesting because this type of breathing brings balance to the right and left hemispheres of the brain, and it also gives energy flowing to our rational left side and our intuitive right side. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'd heard of it, but I might have seen it in a class, or maybe I have done it. I don't know, but like that's how I knew what it was. But that makes total sense as to why that is a thing and the benefits of it.
And so
I knew it today.
And then the thing that you want to do as well is when you're using your thumb, you're connecting your index finger to your pineal gland up here, right? Your third eye center. And yeah.
Okay.
So that's definitely one thing. And we did talk about affirmations or mantras. So I see and some really powerful mantras would be, I trust my inner teacher, my inner knowing, and my intuition. I know you had said a version of this earlier, like when I talk to my clients, I say, you're the captain of your own ship. Like, yeah. I'm just here to help you navigate the map to get to the destination that you want to go to. You know what works for you.
Yes.
And using that strength-based approach. I trust my creative vision and my imagination. So again, looking at how we're now using creativity, which is part of our lower sacral chakra. But what is it that we imagine?
Yes. Oh, I love this. I need that one. I always catch myself saying things like I'm not creative, or, like the opposite of these affirmations. So I love these.
Yeah. I support my inner voice and my inner insight. I am aligned with the wisdom of my highest self.
Ooh, I like that one too. I like all of them, but very powerful.
And I really love the mudra. It's Kalasvara mudra. And so we're going to connect the thumbs and we're going to connect the knuckles of the fingers together, the index finger. The pads of the middle fingers are going to go together. And then you're just going to tuck your ring finger and your pinky finger. And so you're creating a heart. So your middle fingers, yep, you got it. Yeah. So you have a heart here.
Oh my gosh.
And this mudra opens the third eye. It helps with memory. It clears conflicting thoughts. It helps eliminate addictive behavior. And it is a calming mudra. And yeah, you can use this in meditation. And believe it or not, you only need to meditate for a minute for it to change energetically. So we don't need to do hours and hours on end of meditation to get the benefits. 1 minute, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. You can you can meditate multiple times during the day. If you only have a minute to give, and by the end of the day, you might have meditated 5 to 10 minutes. So
yeah. I've used timers and all kinds of things with clients to try to create, space or time or whatever for those moments.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so, of course, my favorite are crystals. And the thing about the crystals for your third eye is that you definitely want to make sure that you're getting high vibrational crystals, because this is a high vibrational part in our system. So we definitely want to look at whether or not we're trying to calm or trying to excite. So the crystals that you choose, no matter what chakra, you definitely want to make sure that you're being mindful in choosing which ones. So emerald is a great crystal for calming the third eye. It is a soft, loving earth vibration. So it can release tension in sinus, migraine headaches, and relieve tension in the head and neck area. So emerald, which is also, again, beautiful, right? So if it's just a paperweight on my desk, emerald is a beautiful color. My favorite color, and also just the stone sapphire, is calming. It helps us have insight and helps us to understand things. And it looks at what are our motivations and choices. So if you are wanting to look at that experience for yourself, kind of looking at cause and effect, and being able to see that within yourself a little bit more, more in depth. The Herkheimer Diamond, which is not a diamond, I use this a lot when I'm performing Reiki, especially if I want to increase someone's vibration. It is referenced as the Bluetooth of the third eye, so kind of tapping into that. So it is a, excuse me, it's actually a clear quartz, and anything that is clear quartz is going to magnify vibration. So it helps bring in alignment with telepathic communications and our psychic abilities, as well as clairaudience, so hearing things. I definitely have experiences of clairaudience a lot. For some reason, right before I'm going to bed, not asleep, but I will hear people talking, I will hear music playing. I just embrace it. Who knows what happened in my house? There's probably lots of parties and lots of great experiences here. So yeah, love it. Essential oils, frankincense, as we know, has lots of ties for religious and spiritual rituals. It helps us focus, and it has a calming effect on our nervous system. So again, when we're looking at fight, flight, freeze, we're not calm in our nervous system, and so we need to bring that back in. And it can help you get into a deeper meditative state.
I love frankincense, by the way.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes, agreed. Cypress is that woodsy kind of flavor, scent. It helps with self-confidence, positivity. Definitely, again, another great one for meditation. So I love the smell of that one. I mean, again, I just love all of this stuff. Sandalwood, which is another one of my favorites, is also another oil that is known for religious and spiritual practices. It is deeply grounding. So sandalwood is a very deep grounding oil, and it creates inner peace. So if you have stress, depression, low self-esteem, it is also considered an aphrodisiac. So if you're maybe wanting to set the mood, sandalwood is also a great essential oil to use as well. So
my mind's eye is literally taking me as you're, talking about the oils, sitting in the middle of the woods. Like that's for some reason that's where, and I'm like picturing the, the scents are like in the middle of like pines. I know that that's a different scent itself, but that's what I like pictured as you're describing those.
And for you, and where you are located specifically, why forest bathing is so therapeutic. It's grounding because you're connected to Mother Earth. You're getting the smells of the trees, which are opening up our intuitive ideas. So yeah.
Love it so much. So much. Now it's cold and I just keep telling myself I need to get myself just a pair of nice, safe walking boots. I don't have to go on a hike, but I can, my mission, whenever, even if it starts getting cold, is to still go on walks. So as part of, staying in alignment and staying connected. I know how important that is for me. But every time it gets cold here in Ohio, I stop doing it. And then I can tell that I'm missing that. So, yes.
It's interesting because one of my favorite places to go winter hiking is near you. So
you stop in and say hi, because I'm
definitely will.
Oh, all right. With Lisa, as always, I'll just keep saying that. Thank you so much for joining me again. I'm pretty sure it'll be you and I again for our very last installment of the Trauma and Chakra Healing Series. So we'll be doing the Crown Chakra on the 21st of November. My words are. So yeah, and after I'll be on vacation a couple of weeks before that, so we might have a change in schedule, or Amanda might pop in very briefly and host some folks, but I'll be back for our last episode for sure. But yes, thank you as always. And so our last episode's on the 21st. We're going to be doing the Crown Chakra, and then as I to cover more. And if you have any questions or anything, I'm sure Lisa would be more than happy to answer them. We can pass them on to her as well. Next week, I'll be hosting Will Mills. He's also a returning guest. It's usually our men's mental health series installment, but Tommy is Amanda's husband, so he's on his paternity leave as well. So it's going to be myself hosting Will. He'll still be giving us his perspective on men's mental health and his own lived experience. So I'm looking forward to him coming back and joining us as well. But as always, take care, everybody.